Hi, I'm Judith Dreyer. Thank you for joining me for this podcast series, The Holistic Nature of Us. I invite you to take a journey with me into a better understanding of the concepts behind our holistic nature and how that ties us directly to the natural world around us. My intention is to be your guide for this half hour as we begin seeing our world with fresh eyes, gaining more understanding and learning how we can connect the dots in practical ways that we are nature and nature's in us. I feature a broad range of guests deeply concerned about the environmental issues of our time and more, authors and educators, practitioners and others whose passion for this earth and for all species help us create sustainable bridges of understanding. These folks are innovators, action-oriented, creating solutions in a variety of ways that honor us and the planet's holistic nature. I am so honored to share their stories, their projects, and their passion with all of you. And today, I'm so happy to welcome back Gail Reynolds. Gail is the Yukon Master Gardener Middlesex County Coordinator, and she's retired from a long career as an information security professional. Currently, she's the state coordinator for the Yukon Master Gardener Composting Program. Gail has degrees from Yale and a Master of Forest Science degree from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. In addition, she holds 5 information security certifications. She's a longtime natural resource and alumni at Yale volunteer, including chair of the Haddam Conservation Commission, officer of the Haddam Land Trust, member of the Lower Connecticut Land Trust Exchange, Haddam Plan of Conservation and Development Committee member, the Salmon River Committee member, Connecticut Botanical Society board member, the executive board member of the Yale Science and Engineering Association. She is also a Yale student mentor and a Yale alumni interviewer of prospective undergraduate students. And I'm so grateful that you're back with us again, Gail. We have lots to talk about this morning.
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate your patience with my schedule to put time aside for me.
Oh, no problem. Gail, you and I have talked previously about plant science, etc., and your background. And what I'd like to do today is to start reminding my audience your love of nature and how would you describe your partnership with nature?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think that nature is there to be enjoyed and revered, but not necessarily destroyed. Because even enjoying it too much, too many people walking in a certain place, or people digging up plants, or things can actually be destructive.
Well, that's interesting. You don't hear people say enjoy nature too much. I know that would mean something different to each of us, but I'm glad that you clarified that. So tell us more.
Yeah, that's because I am talking extemporaneously. I don't have these remarks prepared. So thanks for asking for question. I don't mean like you can never enjoy nature too much, but in the sense that what nature provides for us, and I'm preparing content now for the 2020 Yukon Master Gardener program, and I'm doing the invasives, natives content, and I'm going through just giving a high level introduction to ecosystem services, which are things that ecosystems provide for people. Like cleaning our water and our air and providing, pollinators and things that people rely on. And we have to be careful with that, but we don't want to, go overboard, meaning we don't want to have people, as I said, like digging up plants or destroying, natural areas, or, taking their automated, maybe they don't like to walk and they take their automated their ATVs, into the woods, and that's not a great thing from my perspective. I think you destroy too many things on the ground. So I hope, have I clarified that distinction?
Yes, you have. So we're talking about, we can break this down into two issues. One,
Yeah.
getting out in nature serves a great purpose. It reminds us that we're part of a bigger picture. It gives us a chance to breathe fresh air. It gives us a chance to be in the aesthetics of nature however we like. Some people like to hike, some people go canoeing, etc. And so we know from various studies that it's better for all of us to be in nature more often and get away from the fluorescent lightings, etc. But you bring up another point, and the other point is what do we do when we are out at nature? Do we just randomly sit on a clump of grass and not be mindful of what we're sitting on? Do we take stones and just toss them in and do something different to the landscape without mindfulness? I think that's what you're getting at.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I appreciate your mindfulness there and interpreting my scattered my my extemporaneous remarks.
Well, that's okay.
And I like when you talked about the lighting. I before this call began, I had just listened to a short podcast on light pollution, which
Mhm.
many people don't know about. Because if you've never been in a place that's not very well, a place that's not developed and there aren't people around and there aren't many lights, if you've never seen that dark sky, you've missed out on something incredible. Uh,
Well, we're seduced by our technology right now, and so these are very good reminders. Gail, you have such extensive knowledge of the plant community, not only credentialed but experience-wise, and I know one of your favorite areas to research and to investigate and to teach about are bogs. And I'd love you to spend some time with us this morning telling us about bogs and how you came to love them.
well, thank you very much for that introduction to bogs. And bogs they're they're so unique. They're little pockets, usually, at least in southern New England. They're little pockets where perhaps at the end of the last ice age, a piece of ice just was in a depression and melted, and that's the water source. There's usually no water in, and water seeps out, but it's a very austere landscape. Tends to be very acidic and filled with peat moss and other mosses. And just the things about bogs, there are, when you get farther north, like into, like, say, northern Maine and into Canada, you get much more extensive bogs that can go on for miles and miles, areas that were just, moss covered for eons. And you have the just, aggradation of all that moss and organic matter, and it doesn't go anywhere. It just stays. But here in southern New England, up into central New England, we have bogs that, again, they tend to be smaller. They're tend to be not forested, although there are trees in them. And it's kind of interesting that in southern New England, we have along the coast, we have Atlantic white cedar bogs. Atlantic white cedar, it's in the genus Chamaecyparis. And there aren't many of these left. Unfortunately, a lot of them were filled in or just ignored. But there are some nice ones. There's a really nice one near me. I'm in Haddam, in the town south of us. In Chester, there's Cedar Lake, and south of that, there's what's called the Cedar Swamp. That's an American coastal white cedar. And it's really hard to get in there. Maybe that's why it hasn't been destroyed. But I've walked in on the ice in the winter. Then there are also black spruce bogs. And we don't have much native spruce in Connecticut, but black spruce tends to be really scraggly and nothing like the spruce that we think of, tall, like red spruce or white spruce in northern New England. But black spruce, and then also a tamarack, or larch tend to grow in boggy areas. And those are distinctive because that's one of the few conifers that turns yellow in the fall and loses its needles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the tree layer, but it's sparse. So you have a lot of other things, from the poor drainage, from the acidic nature of bogs. Sometimes you can have some open water in the center, but around that, or if it's an older bog and there's enough peat, you can have a floating mat, which means you can walk on it, but it feels like you're walking on one of those old water beds. Remember those old water beds?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
When you talk about bogs like this, and you talk about peat, I
Yes.
automatically think about the big bags of peat moss in our
Right.
nurseries. That's where they come from?
Yes. Yes. So, every time you purchase and open a bag of peat moss, it's been mined from some bog. And, bogs are a finite resource, so maybe people might want to rethink excessive use of peat
Hmm.
moss.
And what is your best application of peat in the home garden?
Well, I'm not a big user of it,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have one personally, but people use it, as just to add in as a soil additive, or as some people use it to mulch. It does hold water, so people use it, for the water holding capabilities, but you can use regular compost for that.
Okay, that's what I was getting at because
Yeah,
there's other ways to substitute
right,
for
right.
that. I was introduced last year by Craig Floyd down in Mystic with his
Yeah,
beautiful giving garden seaweed, and
yes,
seaweed is great in the garden. It's usually free. It's on the side of the shore. You don't need that much. You
right.
can grab a bucket full and bring it home.
Yeah, yeah. Seaweed, that definitely is true. If you happen to be, I grew up right on the Sound, so I'm kind of used to seaweed being around, even though I haven't lived there in years and years. But you're right, seaweed is, some people are even starting to farm it now. Although I don't, I don't have enough information to talk intelligently about that, but I know that, that is happening. But,
Interesting.
but back to bogs, you have to starting at like the moss at the bottom on the ground level. If you look closely, you find, you'll find little tiny plants. Like that's where you find cranberries. Cranberries grow in bogs.
Oh, so that ties that whole plant in with their
Yeah,
ecosystem.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes, although cranberries don't have to grow in bogs, like I have some growing like just in my garden, they like that fine, but naturally that's where you find cranberries in bogs. And commercial operations generally, rather than having, cranberry plants are low to the ground, rather than having them, having people pick them, they usually flood them and the cranberries will float to the surface, and then that's how they harvest them. They have big rakes and they pull them, and but there are also other small plants low to the ground. Like there's another plant similar to cranberry, like snowberry, and there's a also like a wintergreen, not the one that we find in the forests, a different wintergreen that, if you really explore the ground, you can find those. And cranberries they usually flower like in mid-June. They have really sweet little flowers. Um, and then what you'll also find, other specialized plants that you'll find in bogs, you'll find wild orchids. And um, orchids are just so delicate. There are there are bogs and boggy areas around me, and there is the marsh pink is one bog, one orchid, and then there's the rose pogonia also. Those are in bogs. They're prevalent. You'll never find them upland, but they're just beautiful, like just so delicate along the floor, and they usually flower around Father's Day.
That's interesting. Would you include the lady slipper in here?
No, they grow upland.
Okay.
Yeah, they grow in rich woods, but they are orchids.
Hmm.
There's also another pretty common orchid in our forests, the rattlesnake plantain. That's another forest orchid. They usually flower like mid-August. You've probably seen them in the woods. They have uh, their basal leaves are variegated. They're blue and white.
Hmm.
Not green and white. I don't know what. I think I'm staring at a blue sweatshirt. Blue got into my head. Um, but those are upland orchids. But these are more bog orchids, and there are others that are rarer, but these are the more common ones. And they're usually flower around Father's Day. So I just remember around Father's Day, I try to find a bog to walk in. A lot of bogs have limited access just because they're so delicate. I know there's one near me in Killingworth that's owned by the Killingworth Land Conservation Trust, and
Okay.
I've brought classes there, and I've brought the Connecticut Botanical Society there, and I just always contact them and ask if it's okay if I go in there.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
That would
yeah,
be nice to get the maybe more information about them if people would like to see it. Obviously
yeah,
with care, because it sounds
yes,
like they're precious in our landscape
yeah,
at this point in time. So have bogs diminished specifically here in Connecticut over time, or are they?
yeah, they have because wetlands in general have diminished, whether it's
Mhm.
coastal salt marshes or your more upland inland wetlands, because to a lot of people, they're who like to develop things, they don't consider them to be productive, whereas they're just a different kind of ecosystem that is I think, very necessary. But let me just go back. There's one type of plant that I'd like to also on the floor of bogs that I'd like to talk about before we go on to
Sure.
bog control. And those are insectivorous plants that rely on insects for protein. We do have those in Connecticut. Um, Pitcher plants and sundews and also bladderworts.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, some people know Venus flytraps, and those are cousins of pitcher plants. But the sundews are teeny, and they're they're on the very bottom. They grow on the moss, but you can see they have like a little, um, like a head that has sort of like almost like teeth, even though it's not teeth. It's just modified plant parts, and they can open up when the insect comes nearby, and then they just close on it and they digest it. Pitcher plants are a little bigger, um, and they have tubes that has things that insects find it irresistible, but the insect goes in and then they can't come out. And bladderworts they'll be on more if you have a little open water area, because they actually have submerged roots, and the there are different kinds. Like there's horn bladderwort and there's regular bladderwort. Most of them are yellow flowers, but others, they're in the genus Utricularia. Some of them are purple, and they're just really cool to even, if you try to peer down inside them.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so that's why, you really, unless you created a bog-like habitat, like on your property, if you want these plants in your own like garden area, you could create a boggy situation. Orchids, though, they're almost impossible to get to live, elsewhere. But you can purchase and get these other plants to live if you like create your own little bog. And my coordinator from New London, Paul Armand, he has extensive gardens, and he has created boggy, a bog that's really cool. I haven't. I
Hmm.
just don't have the patience to do that. I'd rather enjoy them out in nature.
Hmm.
But to see, and that's just on the bottom of the bog. There also are just really cool ericaceous plants, and that's from the family Ericaceae, which are sort of like evergreen plants with leathery leaves, like our mountain laurel. That's in the that family. But you have cousins of the mountain laurel that grow in bogs. You have sheep laurel, and you also have bog laurel. And they look similar. You can tell they're related, but they're different. They're a lot smaller than mountain laurels. And you also have other plants, like you have rhodora, you have leatherleaf, and you have Labrador tea. Like, they're not in every bog, but these are bog plants. They're all, ericaceous. They have like these leathery leaves. The botanical term for this kind of leaf is coriaceous. I always loved that word. But you have those, and they have really cool flowers. Like, if you could think of all kinds of variations of mountain laurel flowers. And it's just stuff that you don't find in more upland areas.
Now, we have areas around here that are very wet.
Yes.
So if you have, say, a yard that has these wet spots in it and the streams go underneath and kind of keep everything wet, those would be conditions to create a bog, wouldn't they?
They might be, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You have to,
go ahead.
I haven't done one myself, so I can't talk intelligently about that. But there are like on YouTube and throughout literature, horticulturalists and other nature lovers who will tell you how to create a bog, where to get the moss, where to get the plants, what the conditions. Again, it's really poor, it's acidic, and there aren't a lot of nutrients there, and that's what has led those, plants to evolve to become insectivorous, because that's where they get their protein. Yeah.
Cool. I love how you tie the information together for us in terms of the value and how things developed, because I don't think we always investigate deeply enough in terms of why these ecosystems are really important to us, and they're important to the landscape because of what they've discovered for themselves. I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands of years.
Yes.
These particular systems have evolved, and they kind of know what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah. I mean, there are always evolutionary dead ends, but they don't last. But these are just, they're quaint in a way. And you also, you'll find blue flag iris, which grows other wet places too, but it's just a really pretty plant. And, there are other, the good loosestrifes, like swamp candles, because usually when you hear loosestrife, you think of purple loosestrife, bad plant, takes over wetland areas. But there are some native loosestrifes that are really nice, the swamp candles, which are yellow flowers, but you can tell they're a loosestrife just by their leaf arrangements. And other, shrubs around the edges, that's where you find your maleberry. That looks like it should be a dogwood or something, but it's not when you look at the leaves. And sometimes over time, there are things change, and if the bog gets too filled in, it could become a red maple swamp. But they're really nice red maple swamps. And
that would take, obviously, lots of time for that to happen.
Yeah, but one of the big saviors of bogs has been the commercial cranberry operations, because that keeps them available. There's, I'm a New England Patriots season ticket holder, and so we go up to Foxborough, and believe it or not, there is a bog, there's a path right behind the stadium. There is a cranberry bog there. Hard to believe. I don't know if you've ever been up there.
No.
But it's this really built up place. You have the huge stadium, and you have Patriot Place, which is just hotels and restaurants and all that. And then if you follow the bog path, it just takes you you can hear the stadium. You can walk right there from the parking lots is a cranberry bog. And, it is a artificial cranberry bog, but there's bog vegetation there. My husband and I have visited it once. Usually we don't, because it's such a long drive to get up there, it's about 2 hours each way, that we don't usually leave enough time for that. But we did once, and oh, it was gorgeous.
How about
So,
that? Right next to a baseball stadium, huh? A football.
football. Yeah,
Right, sorry.
yeah, that's okay. That's okay. And I remember about 40 years ago when I worked for the state of Connecticut, just looking at, they had these lists of natural areas, and I remember driving down Queen Street in Southington, which is like one of the big main drags in Southington, and right along the main street there was this little bog, a little black spruce bog tucked away. I have no idea if it's still there, but it was there, just surrounded by all this development. But there it was with the black spruce and all of the bog plants.
And, wow,
I bet
that's
it's not
interesting.
still there. But they're just in if you learn about plants, there's just such a deep appreciation for plants, like you say, that have specialized for their environment, whether it's the orchids or the insectivorous plants or the cranberries, because cranberries are also in they're ericaceous. They're also in the heath family. So they're a cousin of mountain laurel as well. Yeah.
Well, that was fascinating, with all the different types of plants that exist there that we don't often pay attention to. I think what I'd like to just remind the listeners is that they can check their own state and find out if there are any preserved bogs to go visit if they're interested in seeing the plants. That's number one. And number two, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there if they want to create something in their own backyard, especially if they have wetter areas. And number three, to be mindful as we go out walking into our local environments, and pay attention. If we find cranberries, then maybe perhaps look around more and investigate more to see if that's a bog-like area in their neighborhood. And then lastly, Killingworth here in Connecticut has some kind of a land trust, so folks can look into that, and I'll make sure that that's posted, on the website and in the transcript of our talk today. So, Gail, before we leave, do you have 3 tips at all to share, or anything else to share about bogs?
Well, I'd like to say that support your local land trust, because I know I'm just about every town in Connecticut, because we're so town oriented and not that regionalized. Most towns have at least one land trust. Some have even more than that, but a lot of land trusts want to preserve these unique habitats. So check with your land trust and local land trusts, and to see if maybe there is a bog in your area or some wetland that might have this type of vegetation.
Cool.
And support your land trust. Then, again, I'd like to say, enjoy nature, but don't dig it up.
Okay.
Because I collect seeds because I try to propagate things. I have I'm very, I'm not a professional propagator, so I have so success, but I like to go look at the wild types of things. But don't dig things up, especially orchids, because they're not going to grow in your garden. Okay. Because orchids generally, even lady slippers, which are more upland, they have very specific mycorrhizal relationships with fungi in the soil. And if you just dig one up, you're not going to have that relationship, so it's going to die. And the Native Plant Trust, which used to be New England Wildflower Society, they have managed to propagate yellow lady slippers, which are beautiful, but they charge like $85 for one plant because they're so hard to grow. And I am not buying one because I know that it will die when I plant. And then again, I just might want to just say, you might have even said it before, but try to find alternatives to peat moss.
Yeah, that's a good reminder, and we'll highlight that in the transcript too. turning
Yeah.
these to peat moss. Yeah, no, thank you, Gail. Those are great tips, and you gave us a better understanding of the diversity in a bog. It's really fascinating, and I
Yeah.
know I have many listeners who are in the Master Gardener field or they're gardeners, and they're always looking for information on plants. So this will be very worthwhile.
Yeah, and I grow sheep laurel. I grew Labrador tea for a while, but it got too much shade, so it it died out. But you can find these plants in nurseries. Propagators have done them. So, and I just like to thank you again for letting me talk about these things that I love, and I hope that people can sense how excited I am about these, and maybe some of that will rub off.
Hmm. Yeah, we never know where any of this is going to go. We're planting seeds, and I mean the pun, as we talk, and that's the point of the holistic nature of us. So, well, Gail, all I can say is thank you. It's been a
And
pleasure having you again, and I love your wealth of knowledge about the plant world. It's always so inspiring. And this is Judith Dreyer. I'm the author of At the Garden's Gate book and blog. My book is available through my website, which is www.judithdreyer.com, as well as several distribution arms such as Amazon, Nook, Goodreads, and more. I'd like to remind all of you that a transcript is available for each podcast. Please like and share them. Let's support each other and get the word out. Remember, now is the time for practical action and profound interchange so we value our world once again. Enjoy your day.